Okay, well, folks, if we could get this meeting to come to order, please. So welcome to the inaugural meeting, actually, of the 2009-10 school year. As Secretary-Treasurer, I get to preside over the election of the chair. Once that's finished, I will pass that over to the new chair, and they will conduct the elections of the vice chair. So that's the first order of business. So at this time, I would like to call for nominations for board chairperson for the first time. I recognize Lori first, please.
I'd like to nominate Janice Clayton.
Okay. Would please stand?
Oh, sure, why not? I can sit here, can I?
Okay. Daniel?
Nominate Christy Blair.
Can you accept?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll call for nominations a second time. Call for nominations a third time. Hearing no further nominations, they are now closed. There will be an election in this one, so a vote will be required. So I would ask that a motion be made to appoint Director McCrae and Director Douglas as scrutineers.
So moved.
Second.
I've got some here. Just one. It's okay. And how do you vote? Affirmative. Do we vote on it?
You have to vote.
I call the question. All in favor? Thank you. So I will pass out some papers in each direction here. Folks can take some, and in case there's a second one, you can take a couple if you like. I'll give you about a minute.
Can I put your name on there?
We'll be back momentarily.
So, Danny, is there room in the budget to get Mike and I'm having what they took over chairs? Mike and Andrew need the chairs. The nameplate they requested.
As long as they're paying for it.
Have your school funds to pay for it.
Okay, so my congratulations to Trustee Barr, who has been re-elected to the position of chair.
Thank you.
Could I have a motion to destroy the ballots and then? All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Over to you.
Thanks for the opportunity to serve you again for another year, and thanks to Janice for letting your name stand. You are a valued member of the board, and I look forward to working with you for another year.
You're stuck with me for another year. What can I do?
Front of the ship. Who's smiling at us? Okay, so we'll have the election for the vice chairperson. Call for nominations for the first time. Rory, I nominate Danny White. Do you accept, Danny? Okay, call for nominations for the second time. Call for nominations for the third time.
I haven't been sitting down yet.
Yeah, for the third time. In case seeing no other nominations, I'll declare Danny White as the vice chair. Thank
This is chair system. Musical chairs.
Tom Morris, he can't get out fast enough.
No, he's actually running late.
You better be a second.
But he's sitting beside us now, so we're in trouble.
Just like take opportunity to thank Tom for your service as vice chair for the past year on behalf of the board. I know you've made a conscious decision to not run again for anything at this time, and we just appreciate you for your work. Thanks.
But all these people look like all I ever see is the side of the faces.
Okay, so we'll call for the adoption of the minutes of October 27th. Motion to adopt. Second? Second. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Opposed, and that is carried. Thank you. So, motion to adopt the agenda. Second. Any discussion? You have discussion? Oh, Fran?
Wondering if we should discuss the flood update that's emergent.
Okay, yeah, we could have that added. Put that under management reports. Okay. Add that under management reports. Okay, any further additions? Okay, all those in favor of the amended agenda? Opposed, and that is carried. Thank you. We did have a in-camera meeting from 6 to 7 and discussed personnel matters. No presentations or delegations. Okay, so first item on the agenda is old business district grade structure. Gordon, did you want to speak to that at all, or?
Maybe just a couple things, Madam Chair. One, that you see the attachments to the briefing note. I wrote a briefing note as requested by the board around Lake Trail and Cumberland becoming 7 to 9 with their subsequent changes to feeder schools, and you see the briefing note there. And the attached map, the board had requested just an adjustment to the spreadsheets that were put on your website on Friday, that they didn't include the adjusted capacity, the board work that you did in the spring of last year. So just if anyone picked up their board pack on Friday and hasn't updated it, the new adjusted capacity is there as part of the spreadsheet. And I think past that, the briefing note speaks for itself.
Okay, thanks very much. So, anyone want to move any of the motions or pose a different motion? Laurie?
I'd like to make a motion that the board adopt a change in secondary catchment areas with the eastern boundary between Mark R. Isbell and Highland, moving from Anderton Road to McDonald Road effective January 1st, 2010.
Okay, do we have a second for that? Any discussion with respect to that? Yeah?
Okay. Well, I kind of accept this in principle. I do have some questions or concerns I would like to answer tonight by our management team regarding the boundary changes and the students that are currently at Isfield and their siblings. Effective January 1st, 2010, my understanding, anyone who moves to an area will no longer be able to go to Isfield. They'll be going to Highland. Am I correct on that one? So I guess my question and concerns are, we have a number of students who have siblings that will be affected by this decision. And what will happen to those siblings? Will they be no longer precluded to attend Isfield next year? Will that be closed to them? Will they be allowed to be grandfathered? So I need to have some answers before I can make a decision on this motion, please.
Maybe if I may just start and I'll pass to Assistant Superintendent Elwood to talk about our cross-boundary process. There are really two pieces in this briefing note that the board needs to think about in terms of cross-boundary transfers. One is, of course, that shift does exactly as you said. There will be students in there who will be siblings of students at Isfeld and want to go to Isfeld. And the issue being that with Isfeld having portables on site and being over capacity, to what extent does the board wish to have senior management continue to support cross-boundary transfers to Isfeld to whatever capacity? For example, if they have 4 portables, does the board wish us to still fill up those 4 portables with any cross-boundary transfers, perhaps only for siblings? And if not, then any siblings, there basically would be no cross-boundary transfers and those students would go to Highland. The same situation in some ways will arise at Vanier, with Vanier having a population well beyond its capacity and portables being slated there, that we will undoubtedly have cross-boundary transfers as we have in the past, and we'll face the same situation with siblings who want to cross-boundary into Banyan. And I've talked to the board briefly about that conversation around what exactly we wish to determine the official capacity for the purpose of cross-boundaries, because we're certainly going to get those requests, and some parents will want to have their children follow their siblings. With that, maybe Sherry has more comments.
That's the concern, certainly was about to the model, so we need some direction from the board.
So maybe you could just give us a synopsis quickly about what legislation says about cross-boundary requests and siblings, and what our policies say, and encatchment and so forth.
Well, what the legislation says is that a board gets to determine whether space and resources exist in a school. And so that's the piece we would look for clarity for, is that do you want to take, to stick with Isbel's example, the 4 portables at Isbel, does the board wish us to say that space and resources exist for 950 students at Isbel, and then we work to that? And with 6 portables at Manly, does the board wish us to work with 1350 as a population, because we would take that as space and facilities exist? Or does the board wish to stick with the existing capacities in the school, especially at Manly being 1225 and Isbel at 850, and basically declare that we won't support any cross-boundary transfers? Because the sibling piece only applies where space and resources exist. So we need that decision first.
Fran?
I think it makes sense to accept this boundary change, which is really returning the boundary to where it used to be, and this change is being supported by the majority of people that have provided impact. I do think that we do need to be particularly sensitive to Aspen families, many who've already been affected by Village Park closure and subsequent splitting, and by Comox L closure. So these are people and families that have been quite affected in the last few years. So I would suggest that we need to be particularly sensitive and open to accepting cross-boundary applications regarding siblings in this situation, without being declarative about a policy or governing principle with respect to the whole district. I know that doesn't help you, but with respect to other issues. But I think that there should be a distinction made, because to a large extent some of these difficulties were self-made by changing the boundaries in the first place, and now we're changing them back, and changing them back for families already affected. So I would support the change, but also support particular flexibility for these siblings.
Did you have your hand up a second? No. Anyone else have any comments or Danny?
Well, I can support the sibling policy for the Isbel Highland issue, because, and I don't think it's going to be a problem in Highland if they're asking for a cross boundary in there. However, Banyan is different because the boundary change does not impact Banyan at all. So Banyan is going to be at capacity once we move those portables in if they're required. And I would say no cross boundaries. Banyan is probably full.
Anyone else? Well, I speak in favor of the motion as well. I think, honestly, we did receive quite a few inquiries from the public from people who had made cross-boundary requests. And Sherry, I think that you worked really well with the principals and did your very best to accommodate people who had made their requests. And I know not everyone could be accommodated, and I wouldn't imagine everyone could be accommodated again this year, but I think I have full confidence that staff would work very hard to accommodate requests where possible, and that if you felt you were getting to a place where you thought the board should consider closing the school, at that point maybe you would bring forward a recommendation for us to consider closing the schools. But I'm fine to support this motion at this time and let you continue the work that you did last year. Tom?
Just to confirm, the reference to the 80-20 split, that's based on where they would live in relation to the boundary. It's not an arbitrary, we think 80 should go here and 20 should go here. The number is totally driven by the boundary. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, so I'll call the question. All those in favor of the motion? Opposed? And that is carried. Thank you. So we have two more motions here that someone could move or move something else. Green?
Yeah, I'll make a motion that the board adopt a change in grade structure to Cumberland Junior and to the Lake Trail Middle School to become 7 to 9 middle schools effective September 2010.
Okay, second, any discussion on that? Ken?
Okay, I actually have a bit of concern over this, and I have quite a few questions that, before I can give my approval to this, I need answered. And please bear with me, there's a few of them. If we change Cumberland Junior and Lake Trail to 7-9 middle schools, there's going to have a couple of impacts. One is a budget. One is the cost. Now, we have something on our agenda tonight that we're looking at making a recommendation of reducing our budget next year by approximately $2.45 million. And I know that the funding next year is going to be really a big issue. And there is no budget attached to changing these back to 7-9 middle schools with library and all that. So for me to give a carte blanche approval of something I don't know what the budget is, I really have concerns over that. The other issue that I have, and I said before, during, and after the election, and I'm probably a broken record on this one here, is the issue of portables. And I see by doing this, we are looking at proceeding to place 6 portables at Vanier Secondary at a cost of a minimum of $150,000. That's another red flag to me, especially when we're looking at budget shortfall for next year. Portables, some like them and some of them don't. And I know that over the last few years, portables have improved, but we've had some unexpected cost to portables in our district. I know that for CUPE to clean portables is different. There's no running water in the portables. And for CUPE to go out there and clean portables, especially with the H1N1 and all the other things that we have, and next year's going to have an impact on that. I'm also really concerned over now the numbers at DP Vanier and the growth that they're becoming over 1,300 students. And I've had my children attend Vanier, one when there was about 1,700 kids and one was down, and I have no clear knowledge of how the impact of adding those students would have to providing services, especially at the science and labs and that, because we have grade 8s and 9s now there, where those courses are not. Electives are mandatory, and I have no clear direction on how the school is going to cope with an increase of a population of over 1,300 students. And the comments that will make do to me is not relevant to secondary school. Make do doesn't work anymore. We need to have our students in the school that provide them the learning resources that they actually need to learn. So I guess my concern is, why are we jumping the gun and changing from 7 to 9 automatically? I mean, we can do 7 to 10 next year and have a transition, get a cost estimate of how much it's going to cost to convert these schools, give Vanier a chance to maybe decrease its numbers so that it is manageable. I don't think 1,338 students in secondary school, and then you're closing it to cross boundaries where Vanier has an automotive program and a fine arts program and a cafeteria program the other schools don't have. That will impact them across boundaries. So until I get those answers, I'm really not going to support this motion, and especially the cost factor. I don't know how much it's going to cost. And when we're looking at $2.4 million shortfall next year, that's a red flag and herring for me. That's my consent for.
Okay. Anyone else? Lauren?
I have trouble supporting the motion as well. We haven't had conversations. This will severely impact Royston, which is one of my schools, and I know we haven't gone and talked and had that conversation with them. Parts of this could be implemented. I've always believed that Cumberland was its own separate issue and that it should be dealt as its own separate issue. They have too many kids in their elementary and not enough in their middle school, and I feel that we could deal with that as a separate issue. Costs, are concerning as well. We'd never talked about doing it by September 2010. We said the earliest we would start implementing, if we did anything, would be September 2010. So I'm a little hesitant about pushing forward as quick as we are. It feels like we might be ramming it down people's throats again.
Okay, anyone else? Green?
Actually, I'll speak to the issue. I actually believe we do have cost implications in the grade structure report that was put out. There is costing implications right here, including portables at a cost here of $100,000. So, saying that we need 6 portables at Vanier, for me right now, I don't know that there really would be 6. I think we need further discussion on that, but it could be up to 6. For me, as I stated in my speech the last time when we were talking about grade configuration, portables are a lesser evil at high schools because kids aren't in there 24/7. Versus at our elementary schools where, if we don't make these changes, we will have several elementary schools that will need portables. And I think the portable issue will be bigger at the elementary level than it is at high school. Also, if we're going to do a seismic upgrading at Vanier, they'll need portables there anyway, and so this will be a cost to the district at some point in the very near future, I'm guessing. The other reason why, for me, I think it's very important is we are not doing any great service to our grade 10s at either Cumberland or Lake Trail at this point. Next year's grade 10 cohort size at Cumberland Junior is 44. There will be a staffing implication there. 44 is too many for one teacher. You're going to have to pay to have at least 2 classes of grade 10 students. And then, what kind of courses are you going to be able to offer those grade 10s in a cohort of 44? I think that we need to think about that as well. Beyond that, I don't know that I have anything else to say at this point. But for me, this is an easy decision. It's one I believe that we have done consultation on. The paper clearly states that we could do these changes in 2010. 7 to 9, both at Lake Trail and Cumberland, with costing implications right here for me. It's good enough for me.
Anyone else? Danny,
For me, I'll be supporting the motion. The crowding at the 2 elementary schools are probably the primary concerns for me, but sitting here listening to the costs and cost implications in this meeting, what I would say is comparing apples and oranges. Those costs that are going to be incurred as far as the moving of the portables, etc., are out of capital, not out of the operating budget. The operating budget is the one that we're having the difficulty with and the one that we're having to be cut in the coming year. So, I'll support the motion.
I would also support the motion. For me, the driving force is the grade 10 cohort size. I think that's critical in terms of the cohort sizes being too small to allow for robust programming. And also, secondly, that the Vanier community, what I heard during the consultation process, the greater concern was about low enrollment and small cohort sizes. And that there was a point specifically made that there was less of a concern about the number of students and the number of portables. In terms of consultation, I've heard from people that we've spent too little time. I've heard from people that we've spent too much time and to just stop this already, please. And so I'm thinking, hearing the balance, criticism from both extremes, that we can make the decision now. And also keeping in mind that this is a decision that it's not a complete and drastic change, but changing grade structure in a less dramatic way, and keeping in mind also that, of course, there are issues that have to be considered. There was a letter from Lake Trail teachers that came in, unfortunately, after agenda setting time, where they did say that there were concerns, but that they also did support this. So that was important for me. And the last point, unrelated to this specific motion, so I'm sure I'm allowed to talk about this, but related to the district grade structure decisions. These are the decisions that we thought we could consider at this point in time, but there's no mention here of the decisions that we didn't feel ready to make, and that's Brooklyn Lazo. So I just think it's worth mentioning that we, at this day, I think it would be optimal if we could at least begin a plan for when we're going to talk about that.
More of a comment and a bit of a question. Whether it's 7 to 9 or 7 to 10, there's nothing at this point that precludes, as is currently the case, precludes 8, 9, and 10s for going to Vanier early. So part of the discussion hasn't been does that automatically, regardless of whether the board ends up supporting this motion or not, are we making a declaration that Vanier is closed? Because the 1338, how I'm reading that, is not inclusive of any of the cohorts that currently exist in the graduating grade that will lead up to next year's grades in either Lake Trail or Cumberland. That's correct, right?
But that's the conversation that that's the conversation that I've been warning you about, in that either if the grade configuration at Lake Trail, say 8 to 10, or if it moves to 7 to 9, with 1,338 students if it moves, that's the sibling and cost number conversation. For two reasons. One is that we need to declare, this is for you to declare capacity at Vanier. What is capacity exactly with portables or not? We already know that if the grade configuration goes 7 to 9, we'll need those portables. And we know that at 1338, we would probably be recommending to you, as you just said, to come back to a decision about closing. The other piece that could potentially happen is that at Lake Trail, 7 to 9, parents may choose to request cross-boundary for either sibling or just educational reasons. They want their student to move to Vanier and start in grade 8, thereby, again, decimating the Lake Trail population, and we would be back to smaller cohorts. So those are the things that I think that I'm trying to bring to your attention that we're going to need to wrestle to in whatever decision you make. Some of them more extensively, perhaps, in 7 to 9 configuration. You'll have to come to that quicker because of Vanier's capacity, even with portable, perhaps being full. And or we could say 8 to 10, what we experienced last year was a significant number of cross-boundary requests from Lake Trail to go to Vanier. Thereby making it very difficult for Lake Trail to function in reasonable grading structures, grading cohort structures. That's the concern. So we're going to face it, and it just depends how extensive, and we're going to need some direction from you in terms of cross-boundary requests and moving that instead of staying where it is.
Well, I just have a few bits and bytes. I too will be supporting this motion. I do believe that we have reached the conclusion of our consultation on this. We've been consulting with the public for almost a year with respect to this issue, and I don't think that we consulted on doing more consultation. I think we are in a good place to make a decision of this nature. There are other decisions. I last time spoke that I thought that perhaps we should consider moving all of the grade 8s out of Vanier. I still think that that's something we could consider. However, that would not be a decision I think that I would be prepared to make at this point based on the consultation that we've undergone so far. I think that if this passes, there will be a transition committee struck, as there has been in the past, and they will consider the great issues that the Lake Trail staff have brought forward. I know that that has worked very well in the past to make sure a lot of issues get addressed. Like Fran, I think what attracts me here is the larger cohort size. I'm particularly concerned about those 44 kids at Cumberland Junior. Having Lake Trail kids have an opportunity to go to Vanier is not a new thing. That has been in place for many years there.
Lake Trail.
Portables, I hadn't really thought, I don't like portables. really. However, last time, Corinne, when you raised that about portables at high school perhaps being different than elementary school, I hadn't really thought of it that way before, and I do see it differently, whether the portables would be located at Isfeld or Highland or Vanier. I do see that differently, and I think I could live with portables at Vanier for a while. The teachers at Vanier told us they had a vibrant school with 1,700 kids there and however many portables they had. We did receive some feedback from the principals on the west side with regards to the elementary and the middle schools. We didn't receive anything from Vanier, so I did take an opportunity today to call the principal there and ask him what sort of an impact this might have on their space and where the crunch would be. And he said, you know, straight up, there would be a crunch with respect to Peatland, that the gym is quite taxed, that they would have to obviously give priority to core courses in PE that have to run, and then some of the elective ones might have to be lost. So that would be their major crunch there. So there's my bits and bytes. Anyone else have anything further to say? Len?
Okay, just a little bit of a caution on the portables, as Danny alluded. We have been paying for those out of AFG. We do have the capital reserves, but you just have to remember that the capital reserve itself is ministry, and a local could be used properly. So just realize there is some impacts down the road. And there are a few other small costs that would be offered.
Thanks for saying something about perps. That did twig me. There was one more thing I think I had to say, is that we do now have all-day kindergarten cafes. And so I think that at some point we might be citing some portables at Arden or Pentledge or Cumberland, Owl, maybe more there when we're faced with all-day kindergarten. So I suspect we might need more portables anyways. So I would rather see them at a high school than at an elementary school. Great. Anyone else? Okay, so we'll call the question. That the board adopt a change in grade structure to Cumberland Junior and Lakeville Middle School to become 7 and 9 middle schools effective September 2010. All those in favor? Opposed? And that is carried. Thank you. We have one more motion with respect to this issue. I don't know if anyone wants to move it. Lori?
I'd like to make a subsequent motion to close Mark R. Isfeld and Vanier for grades 8, 9, and 10 with the 2010-2011 school year.
Okay, so the motion is to close Vanier and Isfeld to grades 8 to 10 students for September of 2010. Is there anyone that would like to second that?
Second it for discussion.
Okay, Lori, would you like to open discussion?
Well, I think we're causing more problems than solving right now. And I think giving Sherry clear and concise direction on this would help her, because I think we're going to have the same situation happen again with kids wanting to do a mass exodus, leaving schools for whatever reason. I know, talking with the PAC chair at Royston, she seems to feel most of the parents there would bypass Cumberland Junior and go directly to Vanier, and I have a feeling that's going to be happening at Lake Trail as well. So if we give her clear and concise direction on this, that would help.
So, when you know, Chair's response to the communication matter, you're speaking about closing cross-boundary acquisition.
Yes, sorry. Yes.
Sorry.
Sorry. I missed a couple of words, didn't I? Sorry.
So we won't do that. They're all going to go.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Hornby. Anyone else like to speak to that? Janice?
Okay, I would support closing cross boundaries to grades 8 to 9, but I would not support grade 10. And I really believe that the grade 10 is where kids start to branch out and checking on where they want to go for the different paths in grade 10, 11, 12. And each, we have 3 to 6 high schools with different courses. So I also think this really would need have a deep discussion amongst the board as to what our philosophy, where we want to go with that. And I actually would not support the motion right now, because on the agenda tonight, we do have a motion to create this committee to talk about secondary school programming, which I think would also help with that. So while I understand the motion, I can't support it at the moment because it's including the grade 10s, and I don't think that we should refrain from not letting them cross-county transfers.
Okay, Fran and Tom?
As discussed earlier, I think there are two separate circumstances, Vanier and Isbelt, and I think they should be dealt with separately. And I would agree with Janice that I think it's premature to make a determination tonight on this issue. I would like to hear more from Sherry about cross-boundary and about where we're going and see how things are unfolding before making the determination, and then would consider them on a separate basis.
Tom?
So my comments are similar.
Okay, and Corinne?
I guess the only thing I would like to point out is I don't think you're going to see quite the mass exodus that you're predicting, Lori, because Royston can't bypass coming. Their grade 7s have to go someplace, and they can't go to them. There aren't grade 7s there. So I think that maybe this is premature as well, that perhaps once they go to Cameroon Junior, they might find that this is a really good school, it's vibrant, I want to stay here for 7, 8, 9. So I think we need more information for sure about, for me anyway, before we decide to close schools, cross boundaries, I need more information.
Anyone else? Well, I think I'd like to also speak against this motion and just say that I think that in the past, Cumberland Junior and Lake Trail have both been excellent schools. We have some principals in our audience tonight. Jeff Stewart worked really hard to make Lake Trail a great school, as did Lori Carpenter. And we have Phil Mon here, who has worked very hard to make Cumberland Junior a great school, too. And I see no reason why that won't change. We have great teachers located in those schools. And I foresee, actually, that people will want to go to those schools and not vote with their feet to go somewhere else. So I also won't support the motion. Anyone else? Okay, all those in favor of the motion that Isfeld and Vanier be closed to grade 8 to 10 students for September 2010? Opposed? And that is defeated. Thank you. So we still have a motion here to deal with respect to the elementary schools on the west side of the district. I don't know if anyone would like to move that motion or have a different motion. Danny?
Sure. I would move that the board adopt a change in the grade structure to Cumberland Elementary, K-6, Royston Elementary, K-6, Courtney Elementary, K-6, Arden Elementary, K-6, and Nicole Cottage Park, English, K-6, French Immersion, K-7, effective September 2010.
Okay, any discussion on that? Janice?
When are we going to be meeting with the communities to have that conversation? My understanding it was going to be before this was, or did I misinterpret that? We did talk about going to the affected communities to have a conversation with the staff and the parents at some point regarding this decision and the impact. And is that going to happen? And if so, when is it going to happen and what will it look like?
My recollection is when we had a discussion about this, that we thought that if the board determined that we would make some changes, that the trustees for those schools would go with senior staff, maybe take a buddy trustee along, and to go and have a discussion with the school community about what we were envisioning. And that would happen sort of in the next month or two. Am I remembering that correctly?
So I
Okay.
So, just to clarify, I would be going to Royston and not having a conversation with them about this is a possible option for you. It's take it or leave it. They don't have a choice. I thought Jordan and I would be going down there and having a conversation with Andrea and the school to say this is what we are looking at doing, and understanding the implications for that area. It sounds like we're kind of bypassing this now and just making a motion and going through with it, and it's kind of damned if you do, damned if you don't. We're not really concerned about what you're saying. We've listened to you.
That would be one way of putting it. Another way would be, as I said earlier, I think we've consulted with the public quite extensively over the past year or so.
Oh, we have, but we haven't consulted with who is directly affected. Valley View is not affected by this, but there are schools in here that will be significantly affected, and Royston being one of them, pulling that many kids out of that school. They know that they are at a low ratio for students there, and I'm sure that's going to be very concerning for them.
So you have some options here. You could vote against this motion so that it doesn't occur. You could make a motion to table this. You could make a motion to refer it or to defer a decision until something has happened. You have some options there.
There's a motion on the table right now, though.
So my comments are clear on sequence. By virtue of the fact that we passed a motion around 7 to 9 for Lake Trail, I don't see how we can't not do this, because I'm not sure then where did the 7s come from that are in Lake Trail. We're not quarreling with the points made by Lori. From a sequencing standpoint, it's horses out of the barn. Unless I'm misunderstanding the number.
No. Anyone else? Well, Jen?
Just go back to my comment that I think that, I know that the school communities that I would like to have a conversation, and will, through you, Madam Chair, or Jordan, and that, will they be willing to meet with the school committee to have that conversation is my question. Even though after we've made the decision, yes, it's already done deal, but are we still willing to meet with that school community to talk about the impacts that will happen as a result of our decision?
So I think that's a board direction thing, and I think that management has indicated to us that they would support us in those meetings.
Okay, I just want to have that clarification tonight for those who want to have that conversation, be willing to have that conversation with them. Thank you.
So for me, an important feature of this is that we protect the French immersion program at Puntledge Park so that they can flow to the stream at Isfeld and not disrupt that, and that they wouldn't be displaced and have to go to Lake Trail for a year. I don't think that would be fair to those kids. And for the late French immersion kids, that would be 4 schools in 4 years. So, yeah, I think that this would assist with that. So I'm prepared to support this motion. Okay, anyone else? Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? And that is carried. Thank you. Okay, we'll move to the item on CO2 levels in schools. Did anyone wish to speak to that over there, Chuck or Len or anyone? Or?
You guys are heard the draft on the second.
I'm just wondering, I asked some questions with respect to this. My understanding...
I cannot hear what I didn't hear what he said. I'm sorry. You're people blocking and I can't hear what you're saying. I'm sorry.
You have to shout.
You can talk a little louder. Sorry.
Because of the time frame that was raised with this meeting, we were only able to sample at Airport, Brooklyn, Miracle Beach, and Banyan. It is our intent to continue sampling throughout the course of the year, so we get good sampling from all of our facilities. And it'll be an ongoing thing. Looking at the graph on the second page, you can see that Brooklyn falls within fairly even with some of the other sites, and the old wing of Brooklyn is actually lowest of the 4 sampling. schools, Miracle Beach have some that are the same or slightly higher than the highest one, Brooklyn and Bandy have a couple that are very high. So the first page gives you some options on
Well, I just asked a question with respect to the results. I would guess that there would be sort of peaks and valleys during the day, but sustained over the period of a day. What does that look like in the schools? And what were the conditions under which the testing was done? Was it, like 2 classrooms full of kids in there for the whole day and the windows were all shut and there's no fans on? Or
testing was done typical classroom occupied. The windows were open, the fans were running, or the corridors were open during the time. That would be a typical classroom operation. The results here show the peaks. There's peaks are quite high. An average for some of the rooms would have been 400 to 500. Quite a few million lower in some cases. But the peaks are looking about 10 to 15 years to see where the average does come up and where we have to move our attention.
anyone else? Annie and then Fran?
When they peak, is that for the entire day, or is that for a period of 1 minute, 2 minutes, half an hour, an hour? How do they measure it?
There's a couple of indications on the samples that we have that show something green, on or near the very sharp peaks that are just for periods of time. And some of the other peaks might have been for half an hour to an hour. It's kind of a slow, steady line.
Okay, so over a period of 24 hours, could you give them a high and low? Oh, yeah, did you record that? Yeah,
sustained.
that's at some point in the future. Because I'd like to see where the range is.
Fran?
In January 2008, that's where the carbon dioxide charts revealed carbon dioxide issues at Brooklyn. At the time, the issue was that the levels were sustained throughout the day. And based on my checking out Health Canada sites and other sites, that's what I understood was the issue that was of concern. So I think it would be necessary, given now that we have peaks that suggest concerns in other schools, that we get the similar type charts so that we're comparing apples and apples. Because right now, to me, this is apples and oranges. Because when we were talking about sustaining levels at Brooklyn, we were talking about over 2,000 parts per million throughout the day. So what I think we really need is, with all due respect to all the work that's been done, I think we need air quality expert analysis of what all of these results that we've obtained really mean. And does this mean that apples and oranges, Brooklyn is worse? Does this mean we have serious problems in more schools than we knew? The company that did the initial testing, I assume, well, maybe I shouldn't assume, but I haven't heard that we've started using different companies. So does it make sense to have more input so we can not keep talking about this heading towards the third year of the same issue? Because one way or another, I think we need to know that 2,000 parts per million sustained is normal for buildings in BC, or it isn't. If it isn't, we need to do something. And I think we need to do something soon so we don't keep talking about this. And I think I do find it concerning that when we had concerns about Brooklyn, the solution was let's test other schools to see if we have worse problems. I think that's a partial solution, because I think that is important, because we do need to know. But I also think that it doesn't make sense to me to not deal with that problem, because we might have problems, and there might be worse problems in schools we haven't tested yet. So I just think we need to do something one way or another, and decide something one way or another as to the meaning of these. And I would, I don't know if this is by motion or direction, that we contract the company, or whatever company that we believe appropriate, to provide the interpretation of the results. Or maybe it's not even a company, maybe it's WorkSafe.
Somewhat along the comments that Fran made, the question before the board is around HVAC or no HVAC for Brooklyn. That's kind of been the discussion. And I appreciate that all the work that's been done, and it's useful to have. But I can't say I understand it any more than I have in the past. I don't know whether the bar graphs represent a problem at Brooklyn and a significantly greater problem elsewhere. And I, too, would like a clear and sort of a definitive, once-and-for-all conclusion. Is there a problem or isn't there a problem? And that being backed up by folks perhaps who we've used in the past to make other, and previous boards have used in the past to make competent decisions around air quality. So this is helpful, but it doesn't bring me any closer to really determining, yes, there is a problem, no, there isn't.
I have a question. Do we still have a district occupational health and safety committee? Do they meet regularly? So I wonder, like, if this, I don't know if we can refer something to that committee for further discussion, but I wonder about forwarding this and making this an issue for that committee to consider, and also directing that committee consult with WorkSafe BC about what might be acceptable working conditions, because you'd have to assume acceptable working conditions, and how you would go about measuring that would also be what would be acceptable learning conditions for students. I wonder about something like that, because quite frankly, I'm tired of talking about this, and I would like to bring it to conclusion as well. I'd like to know what we're facing. We have sort of scarce financial resources to pay for things. I would like to know whether we're going to need to spend money on air quality stuff, or whether we can do other things with our scarce resources. So that's where I'm coming from. Len?
Yeah, sure. WC doesn't normally get involved in air quality testing. I actually went through their webpage. They don't want to, right? Yeah, and I don't blame them for that. The other thing, they really, in their webpage, they talk about CO2 being an indicator. They didn't actually make any comment about what the actual levels were in that. So their take is, if you have high CO2 levels, it probably means there's some other issue, right? So, and that would be about air quality itself, not particularly the CO2 level was an issue. I think from what I read through many different documents too, is the levels that we're seeing here, they would consider not ideal, but they're also not, of danger either, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I guess 2 questions or 2 points is, we have a health and safety committee. Is there any preclude that a trustee could maybe sit on that committee, listen into whatever it is to have a conversation? It'd be really, I think, helpful if maybe we have a conversation with those in the system that work in health and safety, to have some feedback. I think would be very helpful, if that's a possibility. And the other one is, when I read this one here, and I would like to put this to bed also, I think that, at some point we need to move on, is we have to make a decision, is whether we stay the status quo and stay with Vanier as our number 1 priority, or do we change the process and what goes on there. So at some point we need to put this to bed and move forward, and how do we get there. And when I look at this, to be honest with you, I don't see Brooklyn as bad off as some of the other schools. So that tells me that maybe they shouldn't be number 1. Maybe we're looking at Miracle Beach. That even was kind of, okay, that's kind of concerning. and looking at Vanny, and that's concerning, and they are number one. But I really think it's time that we move forward and do that. But I'm wondering about a trustee sitting on that committee and being part of that conversation over the health and safety process in our district. Is that something that can be considered? It's just a thought.
I think can answer directly in that, yes, it could be helpful. In drafting the briefing note, working with Chuck, what we were trying to do was say to the board, and I'm going to draw the parallel back to the expert opinion. We submitted 10 projects to the Ministry of Education for funding, and we got 0 approved. So if the board is going to move forward with any air quality upgrade, and please correct me if I'm wrong, when we need to submit it to the ministry and get approval. And what we're trying to do from the briefing note is say, we have a whole bunch of aged facilities, and if in the current capital plan that is of the board, Vanier is number one. And so if the board wishes to move forward with a different building, just need to redo that and say Brooklyn's number one or Miracle Beach is number one. And then we ask the ministry for funding. If part of that is an expert opinion, then I think sitting on the Health and Safety Committee or putting it there will just perhaps result in us meeting around it for another 2 months and asking a whole new series of questions. If the board has a desire to contract an external expert on air quality and have them do our facilities in the district as an entire district scan, that might be the only fair way to do it as far as where are we. I would suggest that might be one way you go, but ultimately it's going to come down to your capital plan and asking the ministry, can we do this? Because we wouldn't want to get to a place where we've done all the work and say, okay, great, we declare that this school is the top priority in the district and submit to the ministry, only to have them say, thank you very much, but there's no funding to do it. I guess my snapshot is if you want to hire an external expert, I encourage you to go at it and get it done so that we can put it to rest and then look at the capital plan as another route.
Sorry?
I'd like to make a motion to maintain Vanier Secondary School as our number one priority for capital planning and take preventative measures at all facilities that are identified to lower CO2 content.
Sorry? Again?
And take preventative measures at all facilities that are identified to lower CO2 content.
Second. Okay, you want to open discussion on that?
Just looking at the numbers, with the classrooms that were tested, 83% of the classrooms that were tested at Miracle Beach were above 1,500, 78% at Vanier, and then only 36% at Brooklyn. We've heard a lot from Brooklyn PAC and teachers the past year on this, and we may not be comparing apples to apples right now. I think with our buildings at the ages they are, we are going to have problems with this. And I think it's not just the one school. I think it's probably almost all of our older schools that are going to need some type of preventative measure taken to help alleviate this problem. But I personally view Vanier to be our number one priority still for capital planning.
Anyone else? Ken?
I don't disagree with you, however, I would be more suspicious with the construction of the buildings, because Miracle Beach is one of our newer schools, as far as our elementary school. But I would be looking at the ones that are built, like Courtney Elementary, Brooklyn, etc. They're old, based on wood structures as opposed to newer concrete structures. Because I think the newer concrete structures are probably sealing up tighter than what the old ones are, because you get breezes going through the old ones, which is a natural attrition to the stuff too.
Motion to reopen Village Park.
Oh, yeah. Anyone else? Fran?
I think in light of financial situation, I think we have to look at the capital plan in its entirety. If it's being rejected outright, then maybe we do need to relook at what we have there. Maybe we need to break things down into smaller pieces, because are we ever going to get $25 million to fix Vanier. Maybe we need to consider, depending on what we find out, maybe the Vanier HVAC is more of a priority that needs to be severed from the other changes. Because realistically, if we're getting no to everything that we request, maybe we shouldn't be requesting $25 million bits at a time, but rather $5 million or $2 million.
Want to say anything, Lynn?
I mean, we started to kind of jump around a bit.
Yeah.
I think there's another briefing notes to speak to that. I'm just trying to think of a way to, lead it back to the question. You're right. I think we do need to talk about, that
Capital management.
in the next briefing note.
Okay, so can you read the motion back again, please, Debbie?
Lori can read it.
Oh, Lori can read it.
To maintain Vanier Senior Secondary as our number one priority for capital planning and to take preventative measures at all facilities that are identified for lower CO2 content.
Okay, I'll just speak first, and then I'll go to Janice, and then Corinne. I'm not going to support the motion. I would like to see us have the capital plan discussion at a different point in the agenda, and I don't know, while this is interesting information, I don't really know what it means, and I think I would sooner send this to the Occupational Health and Safety Committee of the district to see what our employee groups and our senior staff have to say about this stuff. Janice?
Okay, I'd like to support the motion on the fact is that we've got something in place. I'd like to leave it in place until such time as we make a definitive plan and going elsewhere. Because if the ministry gets the wind, and they have ears and spies everywhere, and I'm sorry, but I just don't trust these people anymore, that we as a district are thinking of taking our number one project off the table. Is there any way on earth that they're going to even consider that down the line? No, they're not. So I would like to leave it on the table until such time as we sit down and have a collective plan in place and a process in place to say, you know what, guys, we know you get $25 million. This is our plan instead. So I really caution us not to take it out of the realm and support it, because I don't trust them. And I think that if they get a win, we're going to change our mind. They won't give us any money, period.
Corinne and Tom and Danny.
I'm going to agree with Susan, actually, that we'll have this conversation when we talk about the capital plan further on in the agenda. But for me, Lori, when you said 83% of the classes at Miracle Beach, and what did you say?
That were tested 76 or 78%.
That's just what was presented, though. I don't know that that's all the classes. This may be not all the classes. This may only be the classes that they chose to include in this graph. So 83% is possibly not an accurate statement. They could be as low as 15% of the classrooms tested. Which leads me into what Thomas said, that although helpful, this does not give me any clearer picture as to how Brooklyn stands and how Miracle Beach or Vanier or anybody else stands, because I don't know what the sample sizes were. There's so many mathematical things involved there that I'm not really clear on. Although I do like the second part of your motion where you say that we should take steps in the meantime. I think I am pretty sure that the teachers in the schools are aware that things like cracking windows or whatever, I think I read that somewhere in one of the briefing notes, that cracking windows, if even when weather permitting, just to get the air circulating. I know that most of us do that in our homes as well, so. Some of us do. It's a version of fresh air. Tom?
So I won't be supporting the motion. I appreciate the sentiment, but from my perspective, it's redundant. Vanier is at the top of our list, and doing whatever we can in the schools, I think it has happened, it is happening, as the previous briefing on it, so I don't think it's necessary.
Me, mine was similar. It's, if you remove that little first piece about Vanier and take that as part of the other discussion, I can support the back half of the motion.
Okay. So I think we'll call the question on this. All those in favor of the motion? Opposed? And that is defeated. Okay, so we're still left with this item here. Janice?
I'm wondering if we can refer this to the Health and Safety Committee with maybe a trustee attending and bring it back some feasible cost analysis of hiring what you said, come in and do the testing. would be my thoughts.
Debbie is? Okay. Somebody want to make a motion along those lines, or? Tom?
So I'm not going to make a motion, but, I don't want to overplay levels of frustration around this, but I don't know what information we eventually need to be able to make a decision on this. And we've received a fair amount of information. I guess my view is that we have data. I'd like to believe that we have data that we can trust to make an informed decision. I just need the data fleshed out a bit with some recommendations linked to them. Based on this, we should consider A, B, C, or D.
Okay, so I'm looking forward to 9 o'clock coming. We have other business to transact. Maybe what we could do is refer this issue to the Education Committee for further discussion, and perhaps even invite some partner groups to come and join us in that discussion. Fran?
I would suggest that we not discuss this at yet another committee, and I would think, based on what Jordan was saying, the concern about sending it to Health and Safety Committee would be continuing discussion. I would suggest that we just get what Tom is stating, interpretation of the raw data by an expert, that we can all say, okay, this is what the expert says, and now we can choose what we want to do with that information. Because my concern about sending it to another committee, whether it's health and safety or education, is that we're going to be in the same place saying, is this peak, is this sustained, I read this on the internet, I read this on the internet. And we've been doing that for a long time.
Kenny?
It's truly a health and safety issue. The employees should be bringing it forth to their own health and safety committee. I don't think it's really our responsibility to direct what the health and safety committee should be discussing.
Okay, so I'm going to suggest that we refer this for further discussion to the Education Committee. We do have other business to transact, and we're kind of going around in circles a bit here. So if no one is opposed to us forwarding this to the next Education Committee for further discussion, is anyone opposed to that? Fran's opposed to that. Lori's opposed to that. So we'll look for a different solution then, or someone to make a motion to send it to the Education Committee, and then that way majority will rule. Janice?
I make a motion we send it to the January Education Committee for further discussion.
Second.
Okay, is there any discussion on that? Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? And that is carried. Thank you.
I saw that look, Danny.
Okay, use of 15 passenger vans and non-scheduled transportation of student policy. Did you want to speak to that, Jordan?
Just very briefly, there were two parts to this. One was the briefing note speaks of Youth Safe BC, and we simply copied their suggestions for 15 passenger vans right into the policy. We sent this out to all secondary administrators asking if there were, and elementary, asking if there were any issues with this in September, and people were supportive of it being included. And there is a second part that Sherry will talk to around booster seats.
These are included in this document simply because this document actually is still under revision of the policy advisory table as an epic policy that will eventually unfold someday. So in the spring of last year, we were, by legislation, we are obliged to include booster seat registration information in our policy. So it's here, happens to actually occur underneath the 15 passenger van piece. But it was something that really we used coming from the board and so that we're aware that it's part of the big student travel policy that will eventually go through the policy. But it's important, it needs to be recognized by the board. It's been 11 months sitting on the document that it needs to come in front of you tonight. And it simply is cut and pasted from the legislation itself.
Thank you. Jen?
I make a motion that the board adopt policy 6031, non-scheduled transportation of students as revised.
Second.
One minor little nitpicky thing on D16 on page 4. both circumstances, the activity must begin and end on the same day and occur with school district boundaries or in school district boundaries.
I think it's a typo.
Oh, that is nitpicky.
Second line, page 4.
C1
See
says,
private places, conditions of use. Number 6. First word.
I think it's within.
Yes, thank you. Accept that.
okay, any further discussion on this? Fran?
Again, a point that I've raised in the past. I think based on the Bathurst Inquest recommendations that we have a responsibility whether or not we need to implement some specific recommendations. And the one question that I've raised, now that people are getting sick of my discussion about carbon dioxide and tires, but the other, this I think is a safety issue. I think we need to at least ask the question, do we want to make winter tires and or chains mandatory on 15-passenger vans? So I had been overly optimistic as to what the Use Safe guidelines were going to recommend, because I do think, with all due respect to the people who made those, that they really offer little more than common sense in terms of suggesting seat belts, don't be fatigued, be careful around corners, etc. And I think that at a minimum, we need to ask the question, should we have winter tires on these vans, or shouldn't we? Winter tires / chains. So that's what I had anticipated we were going to discuss tonight, but we're not. So I'd still like to push that somebody explore that, and because of that, I would wait before I would support this policy as it is until that analysis has been made.
If I could just provide some feedback on that issue. The policy advisory committee talked about this particular issue at great length over the course of a number of meetings, and Goldberg did bring that forward and the for the tires. With some of the feedback back and some of the conversations surrounding the fact that 15-passenger vans are usually our rental vehicles. We don't have the ability to dictate the tires on a rental vehicle. We accept it by waiving, and usually we rent vehicles because we believe that they are in good condition, they've been mechanically checked, that the liability for the vehicle belongs to the van rental company, and they make the determination about the state of their tires and the kind of tires that they use. They use all, better quality commercial all-season and radials. The idea is, I appreciate that it's about safety, and so some of our protocols and procedures around when we are driving 15-passenger vans in snowy winter conditions, which are at the discretion of the school site specific to the winter conditions of that day. Principals decide if vans go or not. They check weather conditions, they check road conditions, and permits are closed or open based on that kind of information. It would be incredibly difficult for us. We did some checking around the local rental companies just to demand a rental vehicle with a specific kind of tire. We would be unable probably to rent 15-passenger vans under that condition on the West Coast. If we were on the East Coast, the fellow from budget told me that they of course on the East Coast equipped their vehicles with a different kind of tire because of the winter conditions that they experienced over a much longer period of time. So I appreciate the sentiment about that. I'm not sure we could operationalize that and still access 15-passenger vans for our sports teams and our groups of theater kids to go to Victoria and all of that. If we were ever traveling in a road condition where they needed chains, we would be questioning why we were traveling that road in the first place. And the drivers are always instructed to be careful to make those kinds of decisions. And if they were driving in a condition by which they were to be using chains and were not equipped with chains, they'd be pulling over the road, and we would be we have alternate plans to access those kids and bring them home safely. That's all part of what we do in secondary schools all the time when kids are traveling in not BC winter conditions, Vancouver Island winter conditions, which are a little bit different than other places. So it was a fair decision, we did talk about it, and we took your sentiment. Our difficulty is we're not certain we can operationalize that. We just can't access this and have to answer the same time. Unless we bought it, I asked if we could buy it.
And he said no.
We liked it, and I got it.
Man.
I figured 6 would be right.
5.
Anyone else? Okay, call the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you. Next item is long-range senior secondary program planning. You see a note in the board pack and a recommendation.
Recommendation.
Anyone want to second that? Second. Any discussion at all?
Just a time frame. Report back by,
You could add that if you like. It's one of those things where I wasn't certain what this body of work would look like, how long it would take, and so thought maybe best to leave it to the committee to kind of figure that out and let us know. We could ask for a report, status report in 6 months or something, or 2 months, or a year, or whatever you think could be added.
I'm content with the recommendation as is, just with the understanding that perhaps after 1 or 2 meetings, we get an interim report back saying, we think it'll take this long, just to give us some idea around planning and what we should expect or not.
I should just say, too, this is not meant to replace the work that senior staff does in this regard at all. Would be a parallel thing that hopefully would be supportive of what you do and help with communications with schools and engage the public in this discussion as well, so. Okay.
May I just on that part of our normal work would be to look at programs and curriculum K-12, and so we understood that this committee's work was much more long-range declining enrollment, and then our normal K-12 visioning and curriculum is part of our work, and we would just get on with that as we normally do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Through you, Madam Chair, just about the conversation that I had
Yeah.
briefly was senior, secondary, you mean graduation pathway 10, 11,
Grade
12.
10, 11, 12, yeah.
There's the packet.
So that's why Lake Trail and Cumberland Junior were not included in this, so it's just those three grades, yeah. Okay, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you. On to management reports. Sherry, did you want to speak to the French immersion program? Oh, flooding, sorry. Yeah, thank you. French?
I'll pass. Just thank you for your indulgence, but just thought we would take a moment to mention we had obviously an incident in the district last week in our community, not just in the school district, around the rising level rivers and the bridges potentially closing, and we ended up closing our schools early. I want to thank all the staff and the community, literally parents, everyone who responded. Overall, I think things went really very well, but there were a whole bunch of bumps as well in terms of quick notice. And so as we go to debrief that, we received a press release today that there is an impending 100 millimeters of rain coming from the west over to Courtney, and with existing wind and a 16-foot or 4.9 meter, whatever, tide tomorrow morning at noon. And so there's concerns about flooding as well. We met today about 10 administrators, senior staff, to debrief part of what happened before and make plans for tomorrow. And really the message is that we will continue to update our website and use local radio and media as the primary way to inform parents in the community, and that we do not intend, unless there's something literally catastrophic, to close any schools early. We plan to just keep the kids in our building and keep them safe as long as we need to, including keeping the schools open later tomorrow. If there are any transportation issues for students home. One of the complicating things around the message will be the message that we're not closing early, or intending to close early as a result of floods or anything like that, but it just happens to arrive on an early closure day, which is really going to be confusing for the public. So routines as normal. We are closing 1 hour early as planned, but administrators and staff, not dictated staff, will be staying behind in school to ensure our children are safe and they get home okay. And so the website and the radio.
Okay, Sherry?
Madam Chair, before you is a briefing note regarding the recommendation policy and policy itself and draft. There's an error, 22 right away. I had a misunderstanding in the intent of this policy presentation tonight, and the recommendation that I attached to it with that misunderstanding was that the board would waive the requirements of policy 101, 101, R1, and adopt it without distribution. I was correctly pointed out to me that in terms of how this policy has evolved, it has not gone out to the full field. I wasn't aware of that, and so I appreciate that heads up. And so I would be asking you not to do that, and perhaps correct it in a different manner than I had suggested on the agenda. But before you is a briefing note that basically speaks to the fact that we actually don't have an overarching policy regarding French immersion K-12. We have two pieces of policy that speak to French immersion registration and late immersion, but we don't have an overarching policy, which I believe is partly why we are here today, to look at something that speaks to both a philosophical and a complete big picture conversation about French immersion. We've been assisted in that conversation over the past year by the work of the French Advisory Committee, which submitted to the board in the spring a draft document, and I believe a sincere body of work they had worked on for a long period of time with some recommendations about what a possible French immersion policy could look like. And I have contained almost all of those suggestions that in the document that you see before you, in addition to some other text and information that needs to be in a policy for a school district. And so I think we've all had a chance to read it. One of the things that the briefing note speaks to, Madam Chair, is that there was a request for some feedback from senior management about the possible costing and staffing implications of a portion of the policy, which would speak to an increase in the amount of course offerings, particularly secondary course, that we might be able to offer at the secondary level. There is a minimum requirement that the district specifies for students on a secondary French immersion pathway to obtain a French immersion dogwood. We meet those minimum requirements, as all districts do. Some districts go above them. Some districts meet them halfway in the middle. In terms of they do the minimum, they don't do the maximum. A full course load in that first, a full course load in secondary. For French immersion schools, they often will do it in the middle, with probably the grade 11 year being the very end of their full immersion in courses. There are very few high schools in the French immersion across the province that actually do a full grade 12 year, because it limits the number of courses that students can actually access. They're often doing elective or specialty courses in an area that there are no French immersion offerings in, or no French immersion instructors available to teach it. So part of the costing implications are difficult to predict, because it speaks to both the desire of the secondary school, the desire of the students in the secondary school in terms of if they want electives in French immersion, they have to choose them. And the most important thing that most districts find as the obstacle to increasing the number of course offerings is the availability of staff. Because it's very difficult to find a full complement of French immersion staff. So it may be an ideal, and I think the French immersion fact talked about the ideal is always to increase the number of course offerings, but there are factors in play that speak as much about staffing and the availability of staff as it does about dollars. So, for example, if we were to look at increasing the number of courses offered at Marquisville in a significant way, we would look at the cohort sizes, because if, for example, I was speaking to someone the other day about this, but if we have 90 students, we have way more than that. So if we had 90 students in grade 9 who did since humanities, the social studies version of French immersion, we already staff Marquisville for grade 9 students that have social studies. This is a required course. So the money is already coming to those students at Marquisville, these grade 9 students. Because they're on the French immersion pathway, the staffing would be, that staffing, 3 blocks of it, 30 times 3, or in a perfect world, the CBTA would like 4 blocks of the students. That staffing is already given to the school, and they staff it accordingly to the French immersion courses for the teacher, as opposed to the English students. We're fast approaching with the increased enrollment in French immersion, where the cohorts will provide us with staffing to offer some more courses at the grade 10 and 11 level, because we're going to have cohorts that are big enough who are already going to be staffed for a block of science, for example. A science at the grade 10 level, they need one. And if the cohorts are big enough and we have available science teachers, we can choose, so we choose to offer those courses in French with the staffing that's already provided. Where we could stretch a secondary school is if we were to ask them to provide elective courses, or when, for example, this year, the cohort of grade 11 at Marquisville is a very difficult number. And it was higher than we would have liked to be in the grade 11 French immersion course studies. It was over 34, I believe. It might have been
37.
And we would, and in that case, we would have looked at a staffing block. Bill and I talked about that at grade 1. A staffing block to split that off. If they had been in English social studies class, we would have split it off. We didn't have a teacher. So that's the other driving force around offering more expanded course offerings. So my prediction is, and I've done some work with this, we've talked about this, is that there will be some occasions to look at expanded offerings driven by the staffing that's available in the cohort. If the board wants to add additional courses to this building to make that offering more complete, then we would need to be looking at additional staffing, and that's at approximately $11,000 a lot. It's too difficult to give you more of a ballpark figure than that. And then the other piece that we might need some, we do a fairly good job, no, we do a very good job, fairly good, that's unfair, very good of recruiting French immersion teachers to the Valley, and we actually do a very good job of retaining the French immersion teachers that we have. I believe we have very good experiences when they stay, when they happen. But we recruit fairly thoroughly. We recruit in all the avenues and all the places that every other district does a process. We do it online, we do it electronically, we connect with the East Coast. The only cost that we might incur is if we had real need, the board directed us to do something extremely different than what we're doing in terms of recruiting, and there might be some minimal costs attached to that. Like if you decided to send Lord Douglas to the East Coast to recruit, you might not come back. But that's the kind of thing that we do. We're doing just about everything we can, and that's available to recruiters. So there would be maybe a cost involved in that if you were looking for a significant increase in the amount of recognition teachers that we have. So that's what I know.
Okay, so this is the first time that this particular board has actually had a discussion with respect to the French immersion program, and I'd like to know how the board would like to proceed with this. Danny?
Well, I'd like to see the policy circulated for commentary. You know, I have some concerns with a few things in there, and I think I've seen something in the other trustees that's are monetary. Under support of student services, the board will provide learning support. I think he's put in there will endeavor to provide learning support to French immersion.
I'm sorry, I thought we did.
No, that's not according to my and it's the same thing in section part 8, second part 8.
A lot of wills and shalls.
Well, there's also one here that gives me a great deal of heartburn that money will be allocated based on the needs of the district's French programs. Well, I'd like to see the same thing for the English programs, but apparently the ministry does not see the same things that I do, so.
So I can rewrite that. It says the school district will endeavor to hire French immersion staff as follows. And so I thought endeavor implied in the whole document. I'll make that clear. And the monies are the French monies. So maybe I'll put it on that. Thank you very much.
Okay, I have some of the same thoughts that Danny did, because when this came to the policy committee, we looked at it, and one of the concerns we had was the cost implications, but also the board having a conversation as a board with the issue of this policy. And while I agree with Danny going out to the field to come back, but I think at some point we need to sit down and have a conversation, whether it's with the education committee or something, to have a conversation on what we believe is important to the French advisory, policy in the whole thing. So I would also like to make a motion that upon receiving the recommendations of the feedback, that the board refer this to the education committee to have that conversation.
Anybody want to second that? Huh? Okay. Any discussion on that?
I think that motion is way premature. I'd like to see what we get back first, and that'll inform next steps, if any.
Ann and Dan?
I'd agree with Tom in terms of the process and in terms of the content. Also have concern about the mandatory language, even though it's will endeavor, and I can't think of an alternative right now, but the even will endeavor, for example, and that's a number of places, to offer more than the, than the minimum number of courses recommended by the ministry. I think we have to think about what that means, because does that mean that we are going to decrease the analogous English stream cohort for grade 11 and 12 students at Isabel? Because if there are now courses that were previously French immersion, that were previously English courses that will now be French immersion, then that's attracting more students to that and diluting the cohort size. And in these days of discussion of having the 3 high school model with cohort size concerns for grade 11 and 12, I think this may have deeper implications, and even the language of will endeavor, I don't know that we want to do that. I think we need that discussion, and we need to hear what people in the field have to say about that. And that's the same as the will endeavor a number of times in terms of exit strategy. And do we want to make a policy decision that we will, for a choice program, that we will try to help people not leave if it's a choice program? So there are just a number of implications, and it will be interesting to see what the feedback is from the field, and then we can discuss it further.
Anyone else? Danny?
Well, the normal routine for the policy is it gets circulated, information comes back, it gets reviewed, and at some point it gets adopted by the board. So if there's some point between here and there to adoption, there's going to be discussion with the board.
So I'm inclined to support Janice's motion. I think we need to have a board discussion with regards to French immersion. I kind of get stuck on the first paragraph here. It says that the program provides all students with the opportunity to develop French language skills. So when we say all students, do we mean all of the kids in the district would be given an opportunity, or is there at some point we feel that we need to say we'll only have a certain amount of students coming into this program, and we put a cap on how many will come? I have a concern that if we allow this to grow and grow, we're draining our elementary schools, and we're putting some of our elementary schools at risk. So I think we should have a discussion with respect to that, and also consult with the public to see what they feel. If they feel it should be allowed to continue to grow as it has, or if there should be a cap placed on it. There's financial considerations for me. I take a look at if we are going to operate within the framework of the Ministry of Education. We had 40 kids in grade 10 this year in this program. So if we were going to give them 50 to 75% of their program in French, that means creating 4 to 6 classes, probably of 20 kids in each class. I can't imagine we put 40 kids in a class. That gets to be pretty expensive. There's $66,000 we would be expending on that, and maybe that puts some of our secondary programs at risk. Maybe the $66,000 is better spent on making sure that we can provide kids with Physics 12 or something. So this is a broad discussion that this board has not had. The previous board also didn't have that, and so I'd like to get some feedback from the public and then have a discussion with the Education Committee. How much chance on it? Anyone else? Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you. So 60 days worth of feedback, do you think? Okay. Thanks. Full-day kindergarten, Mary Ann?
We have a plan that we submitted, and we're sending it over to the for their instructions. The next step in this administrative goals that we've got across the public, and then we'll next basically, they asked us to prioritize schools based on a certain way, particularly around vulnerability, so that's how this list is presented for you. There's things changing all the time. We're getting more information about funding. We're hopeful that we might get 2 or 3 schools approved for next year. This Friday, Alan and I went to a meeting of all the venues around, all the venues around us that talk about full-day pay and implications for island-wide, so there's just lots of information. Ministry has promised, hope this is true, that they'll get back to district early in January with some decisions, because we need that information in venues so that we can get a plan in terms of registration. Just one thing, that what we looked at was only schools where we could do this with space without portables, without bringing in portables. And then further to our last discussion that we had, we thought we might run a full-day kindergarten and a half-day within the same school. And when we started to think about that a bit more, we just gone for if there's 28 students in a school, we would run a full-day kindergarten and probably a K1 where the students would attend full-day, so there would be just a total full-day.
Makes sense.
I have a quick question. I was at an executive meeting this weekend, and some school districts that had said that they wanted in all schools, or no schools have been told they don't have the money, that it will be only in some schools. Have you heard anything about that, or is that just something that they're...
I think there's just so much different information out there.
No, okay. They're really not too sure what they're doing. Thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to policy 6014, child abuse and neglect.
That was really just a little bit of a housekeeping item when we were reviewing this policy, when we were doing some work with new staff at the beginning of the year. We realized there was a section in the policy, actually in the guidelines, the reporting, a chart that refers to district, a school district document that was being filled out when abuse was reported to the ministry. So we consulted with our colleagues at the Ministry of Children and Family Development, because we didn't think that we had such a form, and nor was such a form required. So what we're suggesting here is that we just remove that number 3 and then just move everything else up. So old number 3 disappears, and we have then 5. What you're showing here is what we would recommend as the actual protocol. And while we were doing that one change, we updated all the language because it referred to the Board of School Trustees, and we changed that to Board of Education, and just updated the language.
So just a further housekeeping in the policy statement itself, if we could adjust Ministry for Children and Families to say Ministry for Children and Family Development.
I just had a question about, under number 3, in the course of an investigation solely conducted by various individuals or volunteer. Is that true, that an investigation could be conducted by a volunteer and parents would have to? It just seemed unusual that a student would be interviewed by a volunteer on a matter like this.
I think it's a poor choice, if I may, of the word investigation, because the legislation, child welfare legislation, speaks to investigative response, and it's not an investigation. But I think we just need to be careful not to mix the language. We're just going to respond.
You have a suggestion then?
We're struggling here to find whether to change.
Number 3, oh, where
Page here.
Parents consent.
I'm just wondering if it's just a... Well, we'll just start survey with our colleagues at the Ministry of Children and Family
So I think that's a good thing. I suspect that this comes out of the trilateral protocol, because the investigations that are led strictly by by the superintendent is related to if it's related to staff of district, not the ministry's responses in relation to any acts of commission or omission on the part of a parent. We would, as the trilateral protocol states, we would assist the ministry would assist in helping along with interviews of children if asked. But if it's because of a suspected issue related to the behavior of a staff person, it's totally under the superintendent's purview to lead. So I think clarifying, I think Fran raises a good point, because it does kind of misrepresent what I think the intent is.
Should we bring it back next month? Is that all right? We don't have do we have a motion on the floor on this? No? Okay. Okay, so we'll bring it back next month. Thank you. Glenn, capital plan?
So page 28, there's a 20-page briefing note. I was asked for an update on capital issues and a letter that the ministry is exploring use of capital, which is restricted one in particular. Anyway, as tied into this is the capital plan that we did send in a few months ago. We did get a letter September 16th. It indicates there's no approval for the capital plan still on that. And those projects actually were small and large, right? We did have them on there. Now, as I've given you information before, that we can use what's left in restricted capital as sort of putting our share into with the ministry. We haven't actually explored that in depth with them, but it's always a possibility. It may increase the chances that we get approval. Alternatively, we could look at trying to find some of those projects that are further down the list in total. I would caution you when you look at that list, which is on, I think, page 46 and 47. We haven't done PIRs, which project reviews that would need to be done. They may end up being quite a bit more expensive than what shows there. I mean, I know prices have gone up and then come down, but it would still be the potential of the 5.9 we need to be able to do one of those projects. So we've sent that letter, with the interest of what the ministry has to say back. That letter is in the package as well, if you want to look at it. So we sought that clarification. The list of projects, just so people know, the $1,709,395,000 we asked for out of capital reserve has been approved. We just got the letter the last couple of days. So that's good news, but that does take that what used to be an $8 million in capital reserve down to that 5.9 figure. I also include the 5-year capital plan, just for information, so people can look at it. That's actually 46 and 47. So I think, as far as supports where Trustee Goldberg was going earlier, I think the board needs to sit down and have a larger discussion, given what we're going to be doing over the future. I mean, again, as you said, Brooklyn and Cape Lazarus sort of play into it too, in terms of, we only got so much money, and what's our direction going to be. So, just for information at this time.
Just a further query for you, Len, you say that AFG is unlikely to come back anytime soon. How are you planning for that?
Well, and that's a good point to bring up, because in that discussion with the board, I'd really be looking for some direction about whether you want to keep back that whole capital reserve to do AFG projects, right? I mean, that's, one way you could go, because as I say, it's unlikely it will return in that form. I'm not saying it won't return in a couple of years, but it may, and it may look quite different. In the past, like, they actually used to get to go through a true capital plan. You would have to apply and they'd approve each project and all that. I think they'll go back to that, for projects for less than $1.5 million. It's a step back, but it may be given better control over it. And then the other, I guess, simpler part of it is, as a lot of other districts have had to do, they've had to lay off the staff, get back within the maintenance budget of what our maintenance is, and just only deal with emergent items. Anyway, there's a bit of a philosophical discussion I think the board has to, sort of fit in with what other things we want to do with that money. There is a limited amount, and of course that always goes back to the ministry to help it through. Any other questions?
Okay, then we'll look to try to schedule an appointment to talk to you about that with the board and staff.
That would be great. Look forward to it.
I just ask Lynn if you wouldn't mind commenting. I think it's really important for the board, if you haven't already, I'm sure you have, the page 46 and 47 to Trustee Goldberg's point earlier about what about smaller funding pieces. And I just wanted to bring to the board's attention that there is a page of smaller funded projects and a page of the big, huge projects. And so some of the projects that we submitted on page 46, even down to $800,000, that's the example of they were all rejected.
So it'd be good to find out what their feelings are, what we're allowed to spend the $6 million on, or if we can entice them to do Vanier with a contribution or whatever.
It's the board's desire. So on page 51, there's a listing I've done of the issues that we face when we start to create the 2010-11 budget. You can say all indications are that next year can be quite problematic. This list that the Director of Finance, Ron Amos, and I, and also with other staff, have worked on trying to divine exactly what's happened to us so far. And actually, the BC-ASBO, which is the Association of School Business Officials, has done a list which we've compared to as well to make sure we've caught everything, and we're pretty confident we've got most of it. We've got all of what we know about. So I won't go through the actual details of those cost pressures. We think are pretty real, but they do total, like on page 52, of $2.3 million. That's quite likely the impact of things that we're fairly confident are going to happen. And actually, there's a few things in there that might be a bit optimistic. The HST tax increases at a rate as if they are going to give us a rebate on it with the provincial government. That may not happen. But anyway, some of those things are still sort of to be worked out. Now, to offset that, we only have a couple of items. The ministry has talked about, in the end, they are going to add $37 million into the block. That, if we were to get all portion on our FTE, or the percentage, we would get about $550,000. The other piece, of course, of a reduction, and we're looking at forecasting around 200 students. That would equal about 8 teaching staff. That would be a reduction of $680,000. So even if you accept that and move on that one, the balance after that is still likely just over $1 million. So that would be almost a given. I think that we're going to be looking for cuts like that. Now, there's a couple of other things that are happening that we're not as sure of, but I certainly think the ministry is going to play with the funding formulas. They've done more than strongly hint at it. If you take the two main ones that would hurt us, would be the funding protection and then the separate funding for salary increases they've been giving as well. But that's sort of not been inside the block. They've just given us the amount and it's kept rolling forward. So that the total of those two would probably be about $1.2 million if they rolled that all into the block funding and redistributed on the per FTE. I won't go into a lot of the detail, but when we do the budget advisory committee, we have quite a bit of work to go through that with people to make sure people understand that. So if you were to sort of take those two together, of course, you're up, into the 2.2, 2.3, and then there's a few other small ones. They are strongly considering going to just-in-time funding for school districts, which would mean all our reserves in cash that we hold now they would eat them up, basically, which would reduce the amount of money we have available as well. Just a couple other quick things. The AFG, we talked about a bit. Without it, it would probably have to be some readjustment of the maintenance staffing levels, and that would feel like a cut. Right? There are 5 FTE right now that are charged for there. There's also going to be some further reviews around community license transportation and a few other small items in the block, so we don't know where it will end. I'd say I've never seen a year where it's been so loose at this point in time. And I'm not certain we will get stronger answers or clearer answers until maybe into March. But regardless, I know we have our work to do. We have timelines to meet around staffing, and we will carry on. The recommendation that I kind of put forward was about, looking at $2.4, $2.5 million range, but we probably will come back to the board with a longer list, because I think you'll have to apply your own guidelines as to what you see as the most important, right? So we will look forward to having that discussion, and of course, as part of your motion that you put together there, it talks about, being a budget advisory committee to help create that list. Any questions?
Okay, so there's a recommendation there. You could move that motion, or if somebody has something else they would like to move.
Motion.
Okay, second? Okay, any discussion?
I kind of like, I'll support the motion. I kind of like it up to when we start, as the first thing we list catering and meal costs. It's the $2.4 million, and we'll start with catering and meal costs. And I don't want the public to believe for a moment that we're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on food. Anyway.
It's probably going to be a drop in the bucket with respect to this. I think the intent here is probably best captured sort of in the middle of the motion, that we're trying to go after cuts that have the least impact on classroom learning, and we'll try to protect that as much as possible. So yeah, it will be a drop in the bucket, catering costs, but hopefully, yeah. Okay, any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you. Just actually one further comment really on this, that we find ourselves in this predicament not because of the shoddy work of our secretary-treasurer. On the contrary, he's pretty cheap and keeps us in line. He is. In a good way. He does his best to restrain Father Christmas from spending money. And we all know who that is. So thanks, Len, for your continued great work. And it's the ministry that's at
Sherry, you'll
fault
never
here.
get those bands.
Jeez, not for Christmas. Okay, retirements and resignations.
Yeah, we have one, Ellen, that teacher that we will retire December 31st.
Thank you.
Management report.
Okay, all those in favor? Opposed, and that is carried. Thank you very much. Okay, board, we're going to have to run here. We have 6 minutes left, unless somebody wants to make a motion to extend the meeting by a bit. Let's go fast. Down to draft policy 7060 grade placement.
Motion to adopt my by committee report as presented.
There's a
Second?
no, there's a motion there, Jen.
It's motion, it's a
For
citizen,
7060?
it's the serve motion, to serve motion not to adopt it. It's a motion to serve. Notice the motion for adoption. I don't need to stop my notes.
We don't vote that? Oh, okay. Well, there you go. Thank you very much for keeping me in line.
So motion to adopt my report.
Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed, and that is carried. Thank you. I have a motion here with respect to correspondence. Does anybody want to?
Serve, just serve notice.
Oh, yeah, okay, you okay with that?
Yep.
Okay, well, thank you very much. We'll carry on.
Motion to adopt policy 1001, our policy formation review as revised.
Have a seconder? Any discussion with respect to that? Brad?
I just had one question that didn't seem to fit with my recollection of what we had discussed, and that's related to the revised regulations on page 65C. That I recall that we had determined that everything would go through the board for consistency and coherence, and then this part about the revised regulation not necessarily going to the board first is different than what I remembered in the earlier discussions we had about it.
Could you clarify for me, Fran? I'm not sure I followed you exactly. You mean like D1?
Yeah, like I remembered that management will submit a draft of proposed revisions to the board for adoption or direction, period. There was no or part that management might not do that and might circulate it directly to groups. So I remembered the first part, and then I don't know what other people recall.
If that's the case, in the interest of also moving it forward to adopt it as revised, I'd be happy to put a period after one direction and move that, if the board wanted to do that.
So delete paragraph 2?
Delete
there?
paragraph 2, put a period after one, after the word direction.
That'd be good.
Adopt direction, period.
Sounds good to me.
Anyone opposed to that? No? Okay. Anything else? I flipped the page already. Okay, so that the board adopt the policy as revised and amended? And amended? Okay, anyone opposed to that? Making that the motion? Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you. So, have the election of, oh, wait a minute, we need to, no, that's good. BC, SCA Provincial Councillor, and, hopefully this is not a line, but I would, like to nominate Janice Caton to be that person.
I accept the nomination.
Is there any other nominations? Call for a second time, is there any other nominations? Third time, is there any other nominations? Okay, declare Janice the provincial councillor. Thank you, Janice, for agreeing to that. So now we need to appoint an alternate provincial councillor.
Nominate Danny White.
Danny?
Oh, no, she's got she's
Do you
got the
accept
other
or
one.
no?
Okay.
Do you accept or no? Danny will accept. Is there any other nominations? Is there any other nominations? Well, I was actually going to nominate Mr. Weber for this. I don't know if you're interested or not, Mr. Weber.
I'll see if there's room elsewhere.
Okay. So you're refusing?
Yeah.
Okay. So having asked for a third time, Danny will be, declare him the alternate. Okay, BCPC representative.
I'd like to nominate Corinne McClellan as BCPC rep.
To accept?
Look at her smile on her face. She's so happy.
Can I nominate somebody else then?
For the alternate.
I think we should nominate Chuck, but,
Yes, I'll accept.
okay. Is there any other nominations called for the second time? Any other nominations called for the third time? Okay, declare Corinne the BCPC rep. Now we need to do the alternate.
Alternate, nominate Tom Weber. There, yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I was gonna nominate Susan Ryan.
Is there any other nominations? Call for the third time, any other nominations? Okay, thank you, Tom, then you would be the alternate. Thank you, everyone, for agreeing to let your names down. Item of new business, Len Eves.
Yeah, trustee resignation, just to advise the board that I have received that letter, dated December 31st, from trustee Fowler. She has asked if people not contact her about that particular one. She is moving out of the country. So Anyway, just as an update further to that, the contract with the Comox Valley Regional District, they're having a meeting on December 10th to decide, their board will decide whether they will be able to hold the election and how much it might cost for us. Otherwise, I'll have to begin the process for ourselves. That's all I have this time.
Okay. Sometime we'll, perhaps at the next meeting, have some good things to say about Lori. I will have.
Think a month.
Okay, let's just do it now. You are going to be really difficult to replace. You have been an amazing advocate for people in your area in the south end of the district, and I think they will really, really miss you. I've enjoyed having you on the board with us. We have definitely not always agreed on stuff, and but you come with reasoned comments, and I really appreciate that. Thank you.
She's not allowed to leave. I've changed my mind. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
9 o'clock, motion to adjourn.
So next, we've got some correspondence to deal with. Jeannie Cameron, newly formed Fine Arts Committee.
Recommendation.
Seconder, any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? None is carried. An item of, We'll appoint someone. An item of correspondence from the CDTA, Steve Stanley, on FSAs.
Refer to Education Committee for discussion.
That's 3.
Sorry,
Any
what's the
discussion?
motion?
Move it to the Education Committee for discussion.
December 10th or January?
Whenever,
December.
There's 2 items on the agenda for December the 10th.
January. If we can fit it in December. Yeah.
I believe the letter speaks to, there's FSAs are being conducted in January this year, is that correct? February? So we should really have it in December. Ed Cohen, December, and that's the motion. Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Information from French Immersion Program.
motion to receive and file.
It's okay. Okay. So, first, second, any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. An item from secondary high school funding, Vanier High School.
Motion to receive and file.
Motion to receive and file. Do you have a seconder?
Second.
Any discussion? I'll say something. This is exactly the type of thing I think that our new committee on grade planning for the future for secondary programming should address. So I'm confident that this discussion will take place in another place. So all those in favor, receive and file. Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Brooklyn Elementary School air quality. See a recommendation there or a different recommendation? Janice?
Motion to receive and file. This is not our, I don't believe this is our job to refer this to Worksite PC, the quality of Brooklyn School. I think we've already dealt with it this evening.
Second for discussion.
Okay. Discussion? Fran?
So I would ask again, what are we doing?
We've moved it to the January Education Committee to talk about air quality in general.
So that addresses part of this. There's still certain things like carpets that were going to be removed from walls and floors that unfortunately we're still talking about. Like, are we going to not do that? Is there a reason, or is it on the list to be considered? Where are we at with the other items?
Danny?
Well, my question is it my understanding correct that we're going to continue with the testing? We're going to continue with the testing and as well as the other schools?
Anyone else want to speak to the motion to receive and file? I'll speak to it. I'm not going to support it. It's time to fish or cut bait. We've been talking about air quality at Brooklyn for a long time. We have the whole school community writing to us here. I think to just receive and file this is not a very nice thing to do. I think we do need to refer it for some clarity from WorkSafe BC to see what they have to say. The community here is citing WorkSafe BC as part of this, and yeah, that's what I think we need to do. I wish I wasn't so tired, I would probably have more to say. Anyone else? Danny?
With referring to health and safety, again, this is another issue that the onus is probably on the employees that work in that facility. Have WorkSafe come in and do the testing. They probably stand a better chance of getting it done than what we do.
The request from this entire community, and it is impressive because we don't often get letters that include PAC, BCTF members, CUPE members, and administration. And I think this community really should be given credit for working as a whole, as it does. They are requesting a public meeting to address the questions. And part of the questions, I don't think they're in here exactly, but also part of the questions may include what I referred to earlier, as in the whole Brooklyn-Lazo issue. And I think we need to make plans at least to know what we're going to do, because that's the question. When will we talk about it? We've consulted other schools, and we keep saying we're going to consult this community. So I think we need to do that, and we need to make a plan and choose a date and just arrange to do that, to deal with the other questions, whether it's by open public meeting or PAC meeting or whatever people think appropriate. But I think we have to make a plan, because it was a year ago that this was raised. Oh, we've got a Brooklyn-Lazo problem. We need an interim solution. Well, there's no interim solution that has surfaced, so let's start talking about the long-term solution.
Do you have your hand up?
I did.
Danny and then Lori.
My understanding is we were going to have a discussion about this at the January Education Committee meeting, and that's an open public meeting that they can come to. If necessary, we can suspend the rules and have the discussion.
Okay, Lori?
Kind of read my mind.
Okay, so then we could give direction that they could be invited to the January Education Committee meeting. Okay, so we have a motion to receive and file on the floor. Could be a subsequent motion made to direct that they be invited to the Education Committee meeting. Any further discussion on this item? Okay, all those in favor of receive and file? Opposed? And that is carried. Thank you. Do you want to make a subsequent motion?
Sure. I move that we invite the Brooklyn community to attend the Education Committee meeting in January.
Okay, any further discussion on that? Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? And that is carried. Thank you. Okay, that concludes our formal business. I'd like to have a motion to extend the meeting by 10 minutes so that we can have questions and inquiries from the public, or a motion to adjourn the meeting. Okay, so I have a motion to extend the meeting by 10 minutes. That requires the unanimous consent of the board. All those in favor? Opposed? And that is carried. Thank you. So we will entertain questions. Don't want to have long comments this evening. So does anyone have a question for us? Barb?
Since my comments is my question, real quick, to sort of goes back to something from much earlier this evening. When you spoke about the potential for possibly up to 6 portables, I appreciate the recognition on the part of the board that there's a difference in the amount of time that students at secondary might spend in a portable versus students in a classroom in elementary. However, for teachers, they're in their portables all day. And in fact, at secondary, they're in there longer with sometimes a lot more students and a lot bigger students. So my question to the board is, in the event that we are stuck, and I appreciate, and I think I've heard all of you speak passionately about importance, but if we're stuck with these portables, do you commit to furnishing these portables so that they are in standard of those brick and mortar classrooms, so that if there's technology, smart boards, any of those things, that they're available in those classrooms as much as they would be available in the building?
If I can refer that question to management, do we consider portable classrooms, do we equip them in the same way that we equip our other buildings?
Me first, or I think we do. I think one of the things that we need to come to grips with is the portables being viewed more as longer term structures. I know they are going to go away as enrollment decline goes, but I think the question is, are we going to make every effort to make them as indistinguishable from a regular classroom, given that they are portable, as we can? And I would say I think that the past experience of September, when we remember a couple of years ago, we got off to such a slow start. A lot of those portables went without the regular equipment that would be in them for probably 3-4 months or longer. And now, at least given this motion, we've got a lot of planning time to go, and probably a lot of those portables still don't have the equipment.
I guess kind of a funny little thing is that I guess that if you have air quality portables or quality problems in a portable, your chances of getting a ventilation system for one building is probably better than for a whole school. So I don't know. Get tested probably more often or two. Anyone else with a question or inquiry? Shannon?
With regards to grade 7, kids that are in grade 7 at a middle school versus kids in grade 7 at elementary school, is there a difference in the length of the day and their teaching, perhaps teaching them?
We'll let our educational experts answer these questions.
What we typically do provincially around middle schools is you take the number of minutes of instruction for the elementary school years, the K to 7 years, and you take the minutes of instruction for the secondary years, 8 through 12, and you average them over the 3 years. And so you say to the community that it's just too difficult to have two different timetables in one school for grade 7 and another one for the 8s and 9s. And so you say to the community that in those years, 7, 8, and 9, that your students will get the required minutes of instruction. Given that there are obviously anomalies, well, what if someone's only there for grade 7 or only there for grade 8 and 9? So what you end up doing is lengthening the day for the grade 7 students.
So then, what my question then is there an inequity between our grade 7 kids in the amount of teaching that they're going to get in an elementary school versus what they're going to receive in a middle school?
Good. I've never really thought about it that way, Shannon. I think there are gives and takes. One of the advantages of students in a grade 7 elementary classroom is the continuity with the teacher and the length, basically the way those relationship works and the quality of instruction that unfolds in an elementary school. One of the advantages in a middle school is the ability to move between teachers and maybe the sharing and more dedicated curriculum specialists on top of the electives. So I think it's a give and take. I've never, in my mind, gone to a place where I thought, gee, is one student in grade 7 in an elementary school getting a different quality of education? I don't think so. And the number of minutes in the day for the grade 7 year, it turns out to be relatively small.
Okay. Anyone else? Kelly?
My concern is that, yes, we've had conversations for most of the years of being here, but the overall consensus of the community was status quo, modified status quo. But now we're going to a large portion of our schools and saying, well, yes, but no, we're going to do something else. And yes, we're trying to solve problems in one area, causing problems for these in our elementary schools, like for instance. And then we come to the whole fact that, we're creating a deficit and we're spending all of this money to change the west side of Courtney.
I don't see the dollar amounts, where the cuts are gonna come from, and how this impacts all of our schools. And like I said, you saw one problem here, maybe another problem there, then we've got crowding, and we've got six portables at venue, we've got no cross boundary things. Is this whole thing just creating more problems than solving?
We've got problems we haven't even addressed yet.
I'm
Valley View,
aware
for
of that.
example, we're going to need to put all-day kindergarten there probably in September of 2011 if the government follows through, so where are they gonna go? Gonna have to put more portables there, there's an added cost for that. We have other issues that, it's just the regular doing business, stuff comes up every year and we just address it as best we can.
But right now, like I said, we have, we had consultations, and, the feeling was this, yet we're taking a whole website of Courtney and saying, yeah, but we're solving the problem, yet you're creating some problems. So I think this is a rush, and it's being forced on people and not consulting with, say, Royston, and saying, look, we appreciate that you want to grade 7, but guess what, sorry, and you didn't consult with them, it's be done, and they have to look at that. I'm just concerned about giving them at least an opportunity to say, what are your issues, let us look at that before we talk about business.
We did that over the past number of months. We issued a report with various different options. They did give us feedback, and we've taken that into consideration, and we're moving forward with our decisions based on that consultation. Tomei, did you have a question?
Yeah, just a quick question. I was just wondering if there was a district policy on tomorrow's early dismissal for parent-teacher interviews. Is there some sort of guideline, or is it up to each school as to before they deal with that?
No, pretty strict process, and maybe somebody wants to speak to the calendar committee? Calendar regulation?
The early closure process is in legislation, Tomei, around the purposes for early closure and how often you can do it. And I'll look to Ellen and Sherry to comment as well. Beyond that, we look to each school community to design their processes for parent-teacher interviews. That's why part of the message you'll see around the whole flood piece is not saying, gee, across the district parent-teacher interviews are on or not. There are different things happening in different schools, and I know Sherry and Ellen can speak to that more specifically. But the legal part is in the school act.
So, I just want, because you get more early, and so there's that time is left for the staff to be able to meet with parents. So it's up to each individual school as to what times those things are happening. Is that the way I'm understanding?
It is. The way the legislation works is the schools are permitted to close up to 1 hour for the purpose of facilitating parent-teacher interviews. It doesn't mean parent-teacher interviews happen in that hour. It doesn't mean that that's where the interviews are scheduled. It means the schools get to close 1 hour to facilitate that, and often teachers work well beyond into the evening for parent-teacher interviews or contact by phone or other methods.
You're right, something that it appears to be not consistently proposition, and that is because the individuals will need to make determinations about what their school needs are, some of the staff and both the parents, about what's available in their school.
Thanks. We're almost at the end of the 10 minutes. We'll take one final question from Mrs. Hodge.
When will the decision be made whether or not the grade 7s at the middle, are they going to be called middle or junior schools? But at the 7 and 9 schools, if they're going to be getting a full slate of elective choices?
What's your understanding of that?
Well, my understanding would be through the staffing process, like in the January 31st decision that the board needs to make around cuts. Part of the budget that was presented through the grade structure paper was the amount of staffing required to have a full slate electives at Cumberland Junior and Lake Trail Middle, which is what I understand them to be called. Right, and those are the official names of the schools. So by January 31st, the board will provide any cuts to what level, and that's when the staffing would be provided to those schools. As you know, in the past, they've staffed at 20 to 4 to 1 for middle school structures and 25 to 1 for secondary.
Okay, thank you very much. So we'll conclude our meeting. We need a motion to adjourn. Second, all those in favor, opposed, that is carried. Thank you.